Good morning. Welcome, everyone. My name is David Hershey. I'm a partner with the law firm of Nelson Christensen, Hollingworth, and Williams in Salt Lake City, and current chair of the Utah Land Use Institute Board of Directors. It's great to see you all here. Wish a special welcome to those sitting at the dais this morning. Governor and Governor Cox and Stephen White are here with us. We're grateful for their attendance, grateful that they could join us this morning, and I think we will have a wonderful session coming up. But a special welcome to all of you. This is a great opportunity to gather together as land use professionals across the disciplines that deal with land use throughout the state of Utah. This conference brings a variety of participants and specialties, and it's the one place where we can all meet together in a safe place to discuss issues that affect our state, our counties, our municipalities, and our communities. There's no other conference quite like this in this state, where everyone has an opportunity to learn and to participate to help resolve some of the issues that face all of us. And we're all here in a common cause to make our state a better place. So we're grateful for your attendance. This conference has been organized and put on by the Board of Directors of the Institute. They're listed in your program, and they'll be participating throughout the day in various sessions. Of course, we could not put this program on without the support of our generous sponsors. I'd like to mention them, the S.J. and Jesse E. Quinney Foundation, the Office of the Property Rights Ombudsman, the Utah Department of Commerce, Salt Lake County, and Piper Sandler. The sponsorship of Piper Sandler has provided tuition assistance for many of you and for students who are joining us here today, and we're very, very grateful for their participation this year. Our Institute partners who assist us throughout the year in our various programs we put on throughout the state are the Utah League of Cities and Towns, Utah Association of Realtors, the Salt Lake Association of Realtors, the Home Builders of Utah, the Real Property section of the Utah State Bar, and the Utah chapter of the American Planning Association. We're grateful for our board members and for these sponsors who have facilitated this conference. And if you would please join me in a round of applause to thank them for their participation. Now, before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. In case of emergency, exits are at the rear and the front. Restrooms are located in the lobby area of the building. You should have received materials as you came in today. If you have not done so, they're out on the table in the lobby or in the foyer there. Importantly, for those who are seeking continuing legal education or other continuing education credits, there are sign-up sheets in the foyer. Please make sure that you sign those sheets today so that you can receive your proper credit for attendance. Also, we are recording the sessions today, and we would appreciate it if you do participate with questions or comments, that you do so in a way that they can be recorded. We will have audience mics available for you, so please use those if you can during the day. We're grateful for all who are participating as speakers, moderators, and panel members today. Grateful for their taking time out of their busy schedules to be with us. I believe I've covered everything, so now I'll turn the time over to Wilf Summercorn, who will introduce our panel, and we'll get started with today's session.
Thanks, David. So when I got here this morning, I was not wearing a tie. And then I saw our dapper Dave. Dave always looks very sharp and crisp. And then the governor's security team came in. They were wearing ties. And I thought, gosh, this is going to be a little more formal than I thought. I better put on my tie. And then I see the governor and Representative White come in looking like they do, and I thought I ought to pitch the tie again, but you never can really figure out what you need to be doing. So, but it's all right. I'll leave it for a while. It's really a privilege and an opportunity to be able to introduce Governor Cox as we're talking about these issues. Excuse me. As you all well know, I'm sure, housing and land use related issues to housing and housing affordability have been a big topic, not only in the state of Utah, but nationally. It has become a high profile issue, and we even have our presidential candidates talking about it and things happening at the federal level. So this has become a big deal. And in introducing Governor Cox, who's going to talk to us about this a little bit, I just want to read to you something that he said last October in a meeting of the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission. Now, what is that? Well, it's a high state level body that talks about economic development in the state of Utah. And and it has a lot of high level people on it. The governor chairs it. The speaker and the president of the Senate are members of that group, as are many other state department heads, local officials, private sector people, a lot of folks talking about economic development. They recognized a while back that if we're going to continue to have economic opportunity in the state of Utah, people have to have a place to live. And it's getting harder and harder to do that with what's happening with the cost of housing. And there are a variety of reasons for that. But in that meeting last October, this is what Governor Cox said. He said, if I could just underscore, I get asked often what the number one issue in Utah is. What's my number one issue? I will tell you this is it. It's number 1, 2, and 3 for me right now. It's not just a Utah issue. Every state is facing this problem. This will impact our ability to be a prosperous society. It will impact our most vulnerable. It will impact the ability of our kids and our grandkids to live in this state and to be raised near us, and that is housing affordability. All of Utah is going to start learning what it means to export your children and grandchildren if we are not incredibly serious of increasing significantly the supply of homes. I can't underscore this enough. Every mayor within the sound of my voice, every planning commissioner, every county commissioner, every city council member, this should be your number one issue. What are you going to do over the next year to increase the supply of housing in your community, period? I want to know that. And if you don't want the state government to make you do it, then figure out how to do it. So, with that introduction, we're going to have Governor Cox tell us how we figure out how to do this. So, thank you, Governor.
Thanks so much. Will, thank you so much for that kind introduction, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to be here with you this morning with so many esteemed individuals from across our state doing such important work. I love the idea of this conference, that we have so many different disciplines that come together to learn together and work together. Will, one thing you need to know about me is even if I do have a tie on, I would always prefer that you don't. So I wish we didn't wear ties ever, but I know sometimes I have to, and I'm grateful when others don't. I appreciated that introduction and sharing that statement, which is much of what I wanted to spend time on today. As I have an opportunity to work with my fellow governors across the country, chairing the National Governors Association recently, I can tell you that this isn't just my number one issue. It is also at the top of almost all of their priorities as well. This is not just a Utah issue. It's a United States issue, and it's not just a U.S. issue. It really is a developed world issue. Canada is struggling with this right now. The UK is struggling with this right now. Almost every industrialized nation is struggling with the supply of housing. Now, there are lots of different reasons for this, and I'm not going to spend all of my time talking about those. But what I hope is that there is, first of all, an understanding and an appreciation of the scope and magnitude of the problem. Look, I can tell you, so I grew up in rural Utah, got an opportunity to go back and raise my kids in Fairview, in the same town that I grew up on. Growing up as a kid, I remember my dad and grandparents always lamenting in some form that the best thing we raise on our farms in Sanpete County are our kids, and sadly, they're also our best export. And there was always just this kind of general sadness in rural Utah that comes from knowing that your kids and grandkids probably aren't going to live there around you, that they're probably going to have to go someplace else to find work, the kind of work that would be able to provide them a great living and a high standard of living. And they always wanted that for their kids. We always want our kids to be better off than we are, but also we want them to be close to us. That's a general notion. In fact, it's not just a rural thing. There was a very large study done here in the state of Utah about 7 or 8 years ago. And as they got more in depth in the questioning, what they found is that was the number one priority of most Utahns. It's what they wanted most, and it was actually their number one fear, was that their kids and grandkids would not be able to live near them. Now, I'm pleased to say that the economy in rural Utah has gotten better, and there are more opportunities now in rural Utah than ever before, in large part because there are lots of great jobs that you can have where you can live anywhere, so you can take your job with you. And so while maybe we don't have a lot of big employers in rural Utah, certainly people have been able to move back there and bring their jobs with them, including some state jobs that we're very proud of. Now, the problem is that the rest of Utah is starting to feel what I felt growing up in rural Utah. There is this general anxiety that exists out there that our kids and grandkids are not going to be able to live near us. They may have to live with us, which is another type of anxiety that comes, and certainly we're seeing some of that. But more and more families are realizing that they're probably going to have to export their kids because they won't be able to afford to live here. And at the heart of all of that is the price of housing. I'm not an economist. I did take one economics class in college, and the one thing that they kind of beat into me is supply and demand. And that if you want to lower the price of anything, there are only two ways to do that. You either increase the supply or you reduce the demand. Now, we could look at demand destruction when it comes to housing, and the way you kind of do that is you raise the cost of capital. That's artificial demand destruction, and we've certainly seen that happening with interest rates growing up. But that's not true demand destruction. Again, as more and more people move away, it's possible that the price of housing will come down because demand will fall. But I don't think any of us believe that that's the right way to do things. And so our only choice is to increase the supply. And that's where you all come in some form or fashion. Now, I'm a free market guy. I believe in markets. I believe that markets, the whole supply and demand thing, when left to the Adam Smith's invisible hand, eventually we will end up with the right balance when it comes to that. But there is nothing, and don't let anybody fool you, there is nothing of a free market when it comes to housing at all, anywhere really in this country. Because of decisions that we've made at the government level, at the state level, at the local level, that put certain requirements on what you can build and where and what has to be inside of it. And every single decision that we make that tells someone what they have to do or what they can't do on a piece of property increases the price of a home. It just does. That's a true statement. And that's not necessarily a bad thing or a good thing. It's just a thing, and it's a thing we have to reckon with, and we have to decide how we're going to handle this. Now, I made the case in that statement that you heard, and I will continue to make the case that we have a moral imperative to make life better for the next generation, and that we are failing as a society to do that. Now, one of the things I learned in my political science classes, and I don't mean to get too philosophical, but I think it's important to understand there's something known as the tragedy of the commons. You may have heard of this, you may have studied it in college. The tragedy of the commons is pretty simple. It's this idea that if a whole bunch of people kind of owned a piece of property where they could graze their cattle, and nobody owned individual lots, they kind of, everybody got the benefit of the piece of property, but they shared in the costs of that. What generally happens in a tragedy of the commons is you end up overgrazing that piece of land because everybody's incentive is to use as much of it as they can, but nobody's responsible for the problem itself. That gets divided up, right? Let me use a more modern adaptation of the tragedy of the commons. You work in an office building and there's a shared microwave. Right? Everybody gets to use the microwave, but nobody's going to clean the microwave, right? Because you only use it once and it's a disaster, but I'm not going to clean it. You know, we all own it, right? That's the tragedy of the commons. There's something similar that's happening in this space, right? You individually, in whatever role you are, city planner, county commissioner, governor, whatever it is you do in your role, developer, you're not going to solve this problem on your own. Right? But you get the benefit of saying we're not going to do what we need to do here, right? NIMBYism is just kind of the reverse side of the coin of the tragedy of the commons. That's somebody else's problem to solve. Our city's fine. We're going to do our city this way. Somebody else can solve that problem for us. And again, I want to make the argument that there is a moral imperative to give our kids an opportunity to actually own real property. I want you to think for a second what would happen if we did have an entire generation of people in this country who never got the opportunity to own real property. Think of think of the political implications of that. I can tell you what happens. It's very clear that those who have owned a home, and I don't have the data in front of me. Other people can share this, but the average wealth of a person who owns a home, the average net wealth is like $300,000 or something. The average net worth of a renter is like $11,000. Okay. I don't believe that Social Security is going to be around when I retire. Maybe it might be. I certainly don't believe it's going to be around when my kids retire. And if we don't give them those same opportunities, we are in an enormous amount of trouble. And I think it goes deeper than that. It goes to all of the problems that are facing our society today are problems of disconnect, where we don't have friends and neighbors and strong communities like we once did in this country. We still do in Utah, thank goodness, but we're seeing a decay there in institutions. And when people don't feel rooted to a place, they act differently. I can tell you when my wife and I were renting, we didn't care who was on the city council. We didn't care in those places who was on the school board. And quite frankly, those places didn't care about us. Even in my church, we were treated a little differently as renters than those who owned homes because people knew we were probably temporary. We weren't going to be there forever. And but I can tell you, when we bought our first home in Kaysville, we started caring deeply about who was on the city council. We cared deeply about who was on the school board. The members of my faith cared deeply about us because they knew we were permanent. We were rooted. There's something about that. There's something about that for family formation. People who want to have kids don't want to have kids until they own a home. All of these things matter. Okay, and so that's the why I believe we have to do this. And what I'm imploring you, each of you, every one of you, in whatever it is you do, to understand that this is your problem. Okay? This is not someone else's problem. This is not the governor's problem or the president of the United States. Heaven forbid it's the president's problem. If you want bad answers, let's let the federal government solve this. This is not Representative White's problem. It is your problem. And we need your solutions. And as I said, because if we don't do this in every community, figure out what can we do more, then it will come from somewhere else. And that's never the better answer. That always ends up being the worse answer, but it will be better than no answer at all. And so that's why we desperately need you. Now, we have passed a whole host of tools over the past couple years, and I so appreciate Representative White and others who have been so engaged in this. There are many, many more that are coming this session, and I truly believe that we can solve this. That's the one thing I want to say. In talking with my fellow governors, they're all very concerned. They're all anxiously engaged. If anyone can figure this out, anywhere in the world, it's the state of Utah, because we do care about solving problems, because we do care about families in the next generation, and because mostly we're almost usually willing to do the right thing regardless of who gets the credit. Although I fear that's changing a little bit in our state. But I truly believe we can do this. Now, I want to share just one of the things. We had a package of bills in 2024 that Representative White was so instrumental in helping us get through. And really, one of the reasons my focus has been on owner-occupied starter homes is twofold. One, we stopped building starter homes as a state and mostly as a country over the past 15 years. Now, there are lots of reasons for that I won't get into, but basically people are either building big apartment buildings, which we need, or big homes, which we also need. We need all of it. We need all of it. But I truly believe that the starter home is absolutely fundamental and crucial to getting more people. By the way, we need more townhomes and we need more condos as well. Again, ownership I think is really important. That's a way to get a foot in the door. But I also picked starter homes. The second reason is because there tends to be a little less backlash and NIMBYism when it comes to starter homes. If I could ask the question, how many of you were either raised in or started your own family in what would traditionally be referred to as a starter home, maybe 1,500 square feet or less, something like that? Do you mind raising your hands? Look at this, incredible. I think we all turned out okay. Most of us, right? It can be done. And so how do we get the incentives to align in such a way that we can get more of that? So we passed this suite of bills to help with that. Really streamlining the process for lots of different things, modular housing, creating tools for financing, infrastructure, and then these affordable units. Weber County and Nielsen Homes just created the first of what we truly hope are many of these mixed income communities to come. And they added 275 detached single-family homes, which is a 38% increase in density over what they were originally proposing. Because of this package we were able to put together, these homes will sell for under $400,000. That's still a lot, but it's the median price of a home right now in Utah is about $500,000. So it's getting under $400,000 is a huge start. It can be done. We truly believe that we can build more of these mixed use communities, that they're better for all of us, that they're not eyesores. They're great for neighborhoods and for that connectedness that is so important. I would also note that in this project, and I want you to think about this, how interesting this is, these homes will first be available for purchase by local first-time home buyers, first responders, active duty military members, and teachers. The kind of people we need in every community. Again, I don't care how upscale your community is, you need first responders, you need teachers, you need military members. And then after that, they'll be made available to any qualified buyer after they get first chance at these within the actual community. This project works because everybody's kind of pulling together. And yes, a little controversial, but I truly believe that this is the kind of out-of-the-box thinking that we need. So I'm begging you all today to go home, to go back to your job and say, this is my problem. If I'm a developer, this is my problem. Yeah, I can make more money doing something else, but I want to figure out how to make this happen. Again, if you sit on a planning commission, this is my problem. I'm going to go back to my community. I know there's going to be pushback in some neighborhoods, but I'm going to find out a way that we can add more supply in my community. Whatever it is you do, please, please, please make this your problem, because if it's not now, it will be someday. And I think we'll all be better off if we fix that problem now before it becomes worse later on. Now, with that, I think we have some time for questions. Are we going to do the questions now, Will, or after?
Yeah, no, we can do them now, Governor, if you're ready for it.
Yep.
So the governor is consented to take questions. So we're hoping that you all have questions. And if you have a question, raise your hand, and then we'll get a mic to you so that this can be heard by everybody here, but also those online. And then we'll get the governor's response. And we'll continue to do that. The governor's with us till about 9:30. If we end before that, that's fine as well, but hopefully you all have enough questions that we can keep the governor busy for a while. So with that.
Good morning, Governor. Thank you for being here. We appreciate your time and attention to this issue. You had mentioned the challenge of starter homes and getting young people equity or ownership in the system. Is the state willing to invest or help us partner to get condominiums restarted?
Yes.
Because in many communities, we don't have the green space to do single-family detached starter homes.
Yep.
But every community has the opportunity to create condominiums that will give young people ownership in the market. Is the state willing to help us with those? And we've been working with Steve Waldrop on this. I'm curious as to whether or not condominiums, affordable condominiums, is a suitable alternative to the starter homes that you described.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Yes, for sure. In places where starter homes are not a possibility, we definitely encourage more condominiums and more townhomes. And the answer is yes. So we've been working on this. Condominiums are interesting. There's been some reasons why we haven't had condominiums being built. There are some issues kind of nationally with that, with insurance companies as well. And so we're looking, and I know I appreciate your work with that. For those of you who don't know, former Representative Waldrop is my senior advisor for all things housing, and I just met with him last week to talk about some of the progress that is being made, some potential for an innovative solution to encourage more condominiums being built in the state. And absolutely, again, I think building equity is really important. A condominium is a great way to get started to where you can eventually get into a home. Thank you. Other questions?
Other questions? Oh, we've got
Don't be
hands
shy.
coming up. All right. We'll have Paxton here.
Governor, thanks for your comments. I've really enjoyed what you've said and agree completely. I work as general counsel for Edge Homes. Our business is building starter homes. We sell 1,500 a year, most of which are townhomes and condos. The biggest problems we face in increasing the supply, the answer economically wise, are twofold. One, land prices. I don't think the state can do anything to encourage land sellers to reduce their prices. We just can't control that. So that's one issue, and I don't know how to solve that. The other issue is zoning decisions. In Utah, zoning decisions are basically discretionary for city councils. It's very hard to challenge a zoning decision. And most of the city councils we face, they're more concerned about getting reelected than they are about giving higher density to a particular piece of property. Now, I don't want to offend anybody in the room by saying that, but those of you in the business know that what I'm saying is true. Most city councils do not want to approve high density, and they can do it legally. They can deny the zoning request legally because there's really no legal recourse. What's the solution for that problem?
Yeah, thank you. So look, a couple things. One, let me talk about the land prices issue. There is something the state can do on that. Now, again, I have no interest in telling people what they can sell their land for. I have no interest at all. But again, the second issue impacts the first issue, right? Because with high land prices, if you're able to put 8 homes on an acre, that's very different than you're only allowed to put 3 or 4, right? So now the math doesn't work. You can't build a starter home on a half-acre lot. You're never going to do that. But that being said, the largest landowners in the state of Utah are the federal government and the state government. Okay, we're the largest landowners. And so we're working with the federal government. Senator Lee has a bill right now. We'll be working with both presidential candidates. If whoever wins, we'll be reaching out to them. The federal government owns a tremendous amount of land, surprisingly within city limits, and just adjacent to city limits as well, that easily could be developed at cheaper prices, right? So places where we could add some density and not have to worry about the land price being such an issue. We are doing an inventory of state lands right now, including UDOT lands, everything the state owns, to see where we have the ability to do more. So you can imagine potentially a piece of property that UDOT owns that we could lease for $1, and then now you don't have any underlying land costs. and suddenly things get a lot more affordable, right? It pencils out. So there is something that we can do, and that we're able to do. SITLA is another example of this. State Institutional Trust Lands. There's a project right now in Washington County where SITLA, because of what we've been trying to do, is putting out an RFP for higher density, something they haven't done before, and so we think that there's an opportunity there. On the zoning piece. This is the kind of the crux of the entire conversation, and that balance that is happening out there. I want to say maybe two things about that. One of the problems we have, and I hear this from city council members all the time, who say, "Hey, we actually agree, and we want to do this thing." And the minute we do this, there's going to be a referendum to overturn our decision, and we're going to lose. So it's a double whammy, right? You're not going to get the development at all, and we just lose our jobs. And obviously that's not sustainable for anybody. So we have looked at that a little bit. And we'll see what we can do there around the edges. The other thing I want to be clear of is, I don't want every city in Utah to be exactly the same. I think it's really important that there are distinctions and differences and character in cities. I believe that local control is important. And we have this tragedy of the commons that is happening out there. And so this is where we're trying to find balance. I so appreciate having Cameron Deal here with us, dear friend with the League of Cities and Towns, who has worked so closely with us and with the legislature, and in good faith in trying to find areas where we can balance that local control versus solving this problem. I think we're close. I don't know that we're there yet, but certainly there are some areas, and I'll give you some examples where we've preempted local control. So if the state is investing in your community in ways, for example, transit. So if we build a transit hub and invest millions of dollars in your community for transit, we're gonna make you put density around transit hubs. That's smart. That just makes sense. You're not gonna have quarter or half acre lots around transit hubs. And so that's the kind of balancing that we're trying to do. But again, I will tell you that every state is really struggling with this right now. If you look at what's happening in California, I mean, California's had this problem for decades, and it has been the worst example of how to solve this. But even there, they've gotten more serious about preempting some local decision making, so that they have to be able to add some density in places where it makes sense. And this is where, again, to the past comment that was read, I so implored local cities to do more of this, to figure it out, because I just know the pressure is building, and I would rather have it done locally, where you get to have that unique flavor, than the state coming in and say, hey, we're just going to do this for everybody. And so there's no perfect solution here, but just know that we're looking for workarounds to get to the heart of the problem.
Governor, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate your comments and what you've done. My question, when I think starter home, I don't think brand new home. I don't know how many people had a brand new home for their starter home. And at $400,000, that might be a step-up home for a lot of people. So I'm just curious of your thoughts of what to do for the existing housing. Yeah. If you have any ideas to make sure that we can make that a viable option, where people don't have the funds for renovation, and then we have these dilapidated or becoming dilapidated communities. So that's a concern for me, that I'm just wondering your thoughts about that.
Sure, yeah. No, we have. We've thought a lot about that. Look, if there was an easy solution to this, someone would have come up with it a long time ago. I mean, there are hundreds of different issues that are all kind of happening around. There's a confluence that's happening. The thing that kind of pushed me in this direction, inspired me, was I actually went back to one of those communities. So my wife's mom grew up in Layton, and their home was built right after the war, right after World War II. A lot of these homes, small, 1,200 square foot red brick homes. You've seen them in these areas up kind of around Hill Air Force Base and other places. And when we would go there to visit my wife's grandmother, there were so many old people. It was you'd go into this community and you could almost smell the Bengay as you drove into the community, and it was fun. We'd go there. We would have family events there in this tiny house, and you'd go to Thanksgiving and you'd see other homes where people came back to visit their grandparents. Her grandmother passed away about 15 years ago, and I hadn't been through that community in a long time. So last year I drove through that community just to go see the old house and see what it was like. And I almost hit like 5 kids. I mean, there were kids running everywhere through this community, just everywhere. It was amazing to see how these were the only affordable houses, and how they had turned into a young community again. That's historically been the life cycle of our communities. Sadly, that is not happening in lots of places. And again, there are many reasons for that, but one of the largest is the rise of short-term rentals. So, if a house is paid off, and the next generation, the kids, decide, well, why would we sell this house when we can just rent it out? Or if they do sell the house, we have institutional buyers now, that wasn't a thing before, who are coming in and buying up these homes and then turning them into rentals. So we've been taking these existing housing stock that should be turning over to the next generation at low or sustainable prices, and we're taking them out of the market, right, which is decreasing the supply. So not only are we not building new ones in that market range, we're taking out old ones that were in that market range and turning them into rentals. That's something we've got to figure out and grapple with right now. I do know there will be a bill to limit institutional buying in the state. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's a debate we need to have. I know I've talked to members of Congress who are looking at bills like this as well to do that. Again, being a free market person, I like the idea of letting markets do that, and if people want to buy a second home and rent it out, I think that's mostly a good thing. Again, though, going back to that tragedy of the commons metaphor, it becomes a problem when there's artificial limits being placed anyway, and zoning does that. So I have to live in the practical world where we're always going to have some sort of zoning mechanism in the state, and as long as that is the case, we probably need to look at limiting the number of Airbnbs that we have in certain communities so that we can keep some of that in housing stock. Now, one of the things that we're doing is under this proposal that passed last year, where developers can get 3% loans from banks in Utah with state backing. If they'll build 60% of their development will be under $400,000. Okay, so that's the start. I want to get them under $300,000, but that's where we're starting. Under that program, these new homes that are being built can be deed restricted to be owner occupied only, so that they can't, when they do come up for sale, they don't get sold to an institutional buyer or just turned into an Airbnb. So those are a couple of things that we're doing to help with that.
Other questions? Back behind you there.
One here.
Okay, one here. Then we'll go back to Mayor Silvestrini. I saw another hand back that way as well.
Thank you, Governor. My name is Raylene Blocker, and I'm a soon-to-be new county commissioner for Morgan County.
Congratulations.
Thank you. My question for you is particularly, well, we come from a county that doesn't even have a stoplight, and it's growing immensely, lots of development, particularly Mountain Green area.
Sure.
We have just a 2-lane highway going through. Yeah. We've had a lot of new development come in, some townhomes, smaller homes, but they should be starter homes, but they're starting, $600,000 to $800,000 and above. But our old highway road there, multiple times of the day, is just so congested. So how do we deal with all the new development and the lack of infrastructure we have and a very low county budget that we have? How do we deal with that?
Great question, Raylene. Look, a couple things I would say here. So we understand that infrastructure is critical. I always say that growth is neither good nor bad. Growth is neutral. What depends on whether growth is good or bad is infrastructure. So if you have infrastructure with growth, the quality of life stays high. if you don't have infrastructure with growth, the quality of life declines. And that's what we're dealing with here. And so in my meeting last week with my team, we were talking, and again, there have been some bills on this, but are there some things that we can do as a state to help with the infrastructure side? I think there is more that we can do with counties and developers where we could give potentially, we already have a mechanism to do this. We have an infrastructure loan fund where we could be able to loan to increase infrastructure at very low rates that would be paid back over time as development happens. And I think that's a way that could help developers. I mean, we're told right now that there are about 200,000 lots on paper in the state that could be built on right now, but infrastructure is the main issue. So that is something that we're very interested in and looking at and trying to figure out. I'll kick a hornet's nest here just for fun. Like anything else, most government and businesses, everybody, we're mostly rational actors, right? That's where the tragedy of the commons happens, because everybody's rational. It's right. Why your microwave is dirty. We're rational in that, yeah, we're going to use this, but it's irrational for us to just clean it when somebody else should clean it. So you get more of what you incentivize, right? And right now, our tax system for cities and towns incentivizes retail development, right? And not housing development. And so, I won't name the community to protect them, but there's a community out there who very recently had a development come that is an amazing development. Again, starter homes included in the development. They're really excited. Mayor, city council loves it, thinks it's a great idea, but they're much more interested in a big box retailer coming in. And of course they would be, because that's the tax structure we have set up. That community will get far more tax dollars from that big box retailer than they will from building these homes. And so even, moral imperative notwithstanding, we have decided, we've made a conscious decision. It doesn't have to be this way. It was just a decision that was made years ago that we're going to incentivize that instead of building homes for our kids and grandkids. That's why you don't have a tax base, right? Because you don't have big box retailers. There's not a Costco in your county, right? And everybody drives from your county to somewhere else to spend all their money, and you get the houses, and someone else gets the retail and the tax dollars. And so if we, that's the hornet's nest. We could look at it again. I'll get killed for even mentioning it, but that's the way things work right now, and you have real winners and real losers under that situation. But it doesn't have to be that way. We could change it and decide, hey, we want to incentivize communities that are willing to build some houses, and we'll give you a higher share of those tax dollars. Mayor.
So, Governor, first of all, thank you for coming today, and also thank you for your sponsorship of a collaborative effort from all stakeholders to try to address this problem on really a number of different levels, number of different boards and commissions, and I appreciate that. And I share your optimism that the Utah way of collaboration, we're going to figure out and we're going to solve this problem. To some of Mr. Guyman's comments, that some of the challenges that we do have in this space is land cost and also public resistance to change.
Yep,
public
sure.
resistance on the zoning side. And I know you probably do. I do a lot of this where I meet with constituents and they're concerned about the change. They're concerned about density. My community is built out and close to Salt Lake City, and every city in the world, I tell people, that has grown has densified. And I think one of the things we need more density, and that solves the land cost issue to some extent. And on the zoning side, we need more education, I think, for people to understand that actually in the right places with proper planning, density is the answer. And density actually can be a good thing. And so my question really is, do you have any great ideas? I know that we've done surveys of our other constituents in the state, but how can we educate our the people in Utah to understand that density isn't necessarily a bad thing to provide housing for our kids and our grandkids.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I love where your head is on this, and I'm grateful for your leadership as well in the league and elsewhere. I go back to what I said earlier about smart density and density in the right places, right? That's the key, and you said that density, especially in the right places, can actually be a good thing and a positive thing. And we have talked to some stakeholders about kind of a public campaign, a public ad campaign, where we talk about the importance of, again, understanding that we want our kids and grandkids to be able to live here, and this is the way to do it, and that change in the right ways can be positive. But it is hard. Change is hard. And I totally understand that. And I'm not immune to it. Every neighborhood I've lived in at one point or another has gotten riled up about something, some sort of change that is going to come our direction. I'll give you one example. Down in Vineyard, I was talking to some people down there. Vineyard's one of the fastest growing communities in our state over the past 10 years, probably the fastest growing community in our state over the past 10 years. Love the folks down in Vineyard, but they were approving some townhomes at a city council meeting, and some people showed up to protest. And they were protesting because they didn't want the riffraff moving in these townhomes. The townhomes were selling for like $550,000, and the people that were protesting bought their homes for $250,000 just about 10 years earlier. And that's kind of the disconnect that we see in some of these conversations. Too often we have, and starter homes are an example of this. If you look at the starter homes that are being built now, they're beautiful. They really add to the community. But there's this kind of perception that density means, Chicago-style slums or something like that. And it doesn't have to be that way. And so I do think this idea of an education campaign where we're showing people what's possible. I'm not good, I went to law school because I don't have some of the talents that people in this room have, where the ability to kind of imagine and see something. But when I can tell you that when I see, when I got the drawings for these new starter homes, I was like blown away. I'm like, oh my gosh, things have changed so much. Modular housing is another area where, I had this conversation with my wife. I mentioned that we were talking to people who are doing more modular housing across the country and across the world, and immediately she thought, oh yeah, my grandparents had a modular home, 40 years ago, and what a piece of junk, and mobile home parks is kind of what she was perceiving. And then I showed her pictures of some of the modular housing that's being built right now, and it's amazing, gorgeous, it just really special. So technology has changed, density, what it means has changed for our communities, and we can do a better job of helping people understand that. Thank you.
I saw a hand over here a minute ago. Is there somebody still have a question there? Or we've gotten them over here.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Dave Peterson. I'm from Farmington, and years ago we had a very high density development going next to a single family development, and the citizens protested, and they're successful in getting in a key connection, getting the city to put a Jersey barrier on the road. And about 2 years after the development went in, they came back to the city council and they said, could you remove that Jersey barrier? And the city council said, yeah, but why? And they said, we're starting to like those people. And so, but what I'm trying to say is the people take a while to change and to accept new ideas. Does the state have, with all the programs they're doing, is there someone keeping track of what's being successful and what's not, and what's working and what's not?
Yeah, thank you. The answer is yes. So one of the reasons I brought Steve on was because I just felt like there was a real vacuum in that space. Somebody who was just engaged in this all of the time on behalf of the state, but also somebody who was keeping track of and talking to every community and understanding what's working, what's not working, sharing best practices all across the state, and that's exactly what he's doing. I'm glad you brought up Farmington, because if it's okay, I kept anonymous the other actor. I'm not going to keep Farmington anonymous because Farmington is an example of doing it the right way. I've been so impressed with Farmington and the way they have been able to mix density with kind of the more traditional city there. And I know there's been some pushback for sure, but over time people have really come to accept that. And again, when your kid can actually afford to live in your community, it really changes people's perception of these developments and how to do them the right way. So I want to give a pat on the back to my friends in Farmington. I use you guys as an example often. Thank you. Got time for maybe one or two more.
Yeah, I think we have, let's try one more back up there, or from Rob.
Thank you. My name is Rob Hartshorn. I'm in-house counsel for D.R. Horton, Utah. We've spoken once before at a golf tournament, but hitting on Paxton's point, and I liked Paxton better when he was my outside counsel. Now he works for a competitor, but it's good to see him here. This idea of a minimum base density, you have cities that say, yeah, we want density for our children, just don't do it here. That's the classic NIMBYism.
Yep.
And we also have this push and pull of local control versus state control. And I would throw in a third party, the landowner, who that is the actual truest form of local control for them to decide what they do with their own land. So to kind of marry those concepts, the proposal we floated up would be to have an average minimum base density for all remaining greenfield. And a city still has control on how to reach that average. They can say this much high density, this much low density, somewhere in between with the cottages or the single family. And just wanted to get your ideas on that concept.
Yeah, thank you. So we have lots of ideas that we'll be discussing with the legislature this year. That's one of the ideas that have been floated up. There's another one. We passed some ADU, accessory dwelling unit legislation a few years ago. It's been maybe marginally successful. There are lots of places that still don't allow for ADUs. So I know there's discussion around kind of mandatory ADUs as well. The ultimate question is, again, where we draw that line, how far we want to go as a state to do that. I do like the idea of again making sure that there's still that local flavor, that local communities do look different, do have different areas, that everybody has some density somewhere, but it shouldn't be everywhere. Again, there is another side to what I'm saying, where life gets worse for everyone if we don't do it the right way. And I want to be really careful that we don't go too far the other direction. The pendulum swings too far the other direction, and we end up in a place where our kids and grandkids move away, not because they can't afford to live here, but because they don't want to live here. All right. So I'm just going to temper everything I just said. But what I can say is that we will be having robust discussions about that proposal and others, and seeing where we land in a way that can really make a difference. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having me here. Let me just conclude by saying this. I wouldn't trade places with anyone else in this country. And I know 49 other governors that would trade places with me in a heartbeat. We have our challenges, for sure. But these are the good types of challenges to have. These are challenges of abundance, challenges because things are going well, challenges of having the best economy in the country over the past 10 years, challenges of having some of the most innovative people in the country, challenges, frankly, of having people want to live here. I've said many times I'd love to build a wall around the state of Utah and make California pay for it, but that's not how things work here. Our nation was set up, this idea of federalism, that states would be laboratories of democracy. And that was a brilliant idea to make us compete against each other. And as states do better, people will be drawn to those states. And I'm proud that we are an in-migration state. I would love to stop it all. I really would. But people ask me all the time, why are you letting all of these people come here? Why won't you stop development here? And I tell people all of the time, the only way to stop people from coming here is to suck at being a state, is to be really bad at what we do. Because I know states where that's happening. There are a few states where people are leaving, including one I just mentioned. And they're leaving because they're doing a terrible job. And I'm hopeful. I got accused of saying that I hated Californians moving here. That's not what I said, for the record. What I said was, I wish California would adopt more of Utah's policy so people didn't feel like they had to leave. That's what I said. And I stand by that. But I think it's interesting, and it may be interesting of note to you, that when you look at all the in-migration states, well, when you look at all the in-migration in every state, there's something that stands out in a very, very profound way. And that is that of the people moving back to Utah, and we're now about a 60-40 state, 60% growth coming from outside in, and 40% from natural growth inside, our kids and grandkids. 25% of those moving into Utah every year have lived here before. The next closest state is like 11%, and most states are like 3 to 5%. We are more than double the next closest state in people moving back here. So most 25% of that in-migration are people who have lived here before. Those aren't people who moved here and then moved away and then moved back. Those are our kids and grandkids who moved away for school or a job and wanted to come back and raise their families here, because we do have something very special, and we should do everything possible to preserve that which is special. And one of the things that has been so special here is that people could afford to actually own a home. And that's my number 1, 2, and 3 goals over the next 4 years, to make it possible for them to come back and live here again. I'm proud of this state. I'm proud of our people. I'm grateful for the opportunity that I get to be a part of this state every day. And I'm grateful for what you are doing in your roles. Just a reminder, I was a city councilman first, and a mayor second, and a county commissioner third. And that's where my heart is, because I know you guys can solve these problems better than I can. So thank you for your efforts to do that. Keep up the good work, and God bless you. Thank you.
So I just want to let the governor know real quick. He mentioned that when he bought his first home, which happened to be in Kaysville, I didn't know that.
It was technically Fruit Heights.
Oh, okay.
Everybody thought it was Kaysville. We were right on the border. But yeah.
Well, and he says that made him start to care about who was in office. I just want to let you know, I'm on the Planning Commission in Kaysville.
I love that.
So there we go.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Mayor. Or Mayor, yes. Governor, thank you so much. That's right. Thank you. Well, thanks to Governor Cox. We really appreciate his willingness to be here and to address this important issue for us. Our next speaker is Representative Stephen White. Representative White has been in the legislature how many years now? 3 years. And look how fast he rises. He is, was recently, well, within the last year or two, appointed as one of the co-chairs of the Commission on Housing Affordability. And so he is involved directly in these issues that we've been talking about. Representative White lives in Mapleton, represents an area that includes the cities of Mapleton, Springville, and Spanish Fork. And Utah County, as those of you who follow the statistics know, is our most rapidly growing county in the state of Utah, outdoing even Salt Lake County at this point, which is remarkable. So there's so much growth happening there, and he's intimately involved in this. In the last year or so, he has been the sponsor of some of the bills that have come forth from the Commission on Housing Affordability and the Land Use Task Force, and has done a great job in representing those bills, and is growing more and more intimately acquainted with the issues that we've been talking about here. And he's going to talk to us a little bit about those. Representative White will talk to us for a bit, and then he'll take some questions. And then following that, we will break and bring another panel up. So with that, Representative White.
Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be with you. Would everyone like to stand up for just a minute here? Maybe we'll get the blood flowing in our legs and be able to take a break for just a second here. Well, thank you for coming out on a morning to be able to talk about this important issue in the state. I was absolutely thrilled and excited for the invitation to be able to come to participate, and also to be able to sit here afterwards to be able to listen and learn and get greater insights of what can happen from a state perspective, a legislative perspective. I'd like to thank the great work of the Utah Land Use Institute, and also congratulate the work for 25 years of pulling people together, working on issues, and being able to help the state be where it is today. So this state is where it is because of your work, your expertise, the collaborative efforts that are going on. So congratulations on 25 years, and it's a privilege to be able to serve with you. My background, my day job, where I'm playing hooky from right now for a couple of hours, is in Provo. I work at Rocky Mountain University of Health Professions, which is a private graduate level healthcare university offering about 24 different degrees. So it's wonderful to work there, and then on the side have the privilege of being able to serve in the legislature for these last 3 years. My wife and I, our family, my wife Roxanne, we have 5 children, ages 23 to 12. And we have 3 out in college and 2 at home. And so this topic and the situation of housing right now is even becoming more and more real to us in our family, as we know as our children are getting close to that time frame where they'll want to go out and be able to find their first home and be able to purchase their first home. So that's a personal interest that I have in this. And when I was asked by the former Speaker of the House to serve as the co-chair of the Commission on Housing Affordability 2 years ago, I explained to him that I don't have the background in land use and in housing. And he said, we need you to be able to pull people together, to be able to talk through these issues, and to be able to help find out what the problems are, to find the right solutions going forward. And so I was grateful for that opportunity to serve in that capacity, along with Senator Lincoln Fillmore from the Senate, who also co-chairs. And so we've been asked about the next 45 minutes to be able to just talk a little bit and build upon what the governor talked about. And with him, what he shared, and with also your great questions and the conversations it's had, I don't want to duplicate and replicate. I was prepared to kind of share some similar things. And so I might cut mine just a little bit shorter, where offer more opportunities for conversations and to ask questions, but also for me to ask you questions of what's on your mind and what you think would be good solutions forward that the legislature should be able to look at and be able to consider. Now, maybe to start with some good news. As I have the opportunity to serve in the district I represent, but also meet with people throughout the entire state, I'm hearing some consistent things from St. George to Blanding up to Cache Valley. I am consistently hearing from people and from city leaders that everyone wants to make home ownership possible. I am also consistently hearing from legislators to be able to help home ownership be possible. I'm hearing from county commissioners, city councilors, planning commissioners. I'm hearing from home builders, from realtors, from all these different groups and organizations and stakeholders that we need to be able to focus on home ownership. And so the good news is that everyone is coming together around this desire to make home ownership possible, especially for our kids and our grandkids. And the question and the opportunity before us and the challenge is how to do that, as the governor has just referenced. As I look across the room, it's wonderful to see so many friends and colleagues that I'm able to serve with, from the league, from the home builders, from realtors, from mayors, from city councilors, from planning commissioners, being able to see people come together collaboratively. For those that might not be familiar with the Commission on Housing Affordability, this was a commission that was created by the state several years ago to be able to look at housing, to be able to pull people together to find solutions to help with the issue. Around that table is representation of cities, counties, transportation, private sector, realtors, the whole gamut of all the different areas are around that table looking and talking about issues and about potential solutions. That Commission on Housing Affordability starts to meet about every year after the legislative session in about May. It meets every month up until November and getting prepared for that legislative session with policy recommendations and bill proposals. That commission has been in full throttle again this year. Right now, there are 4 subcommittees, all specifically talking about different areas. Those subcommittees are even meeting on a weekly basis and pulling people together to get input and to come up with proposed solutions. So that's one aspect that's happening right now is the Commission on Housing Affordability making recommendations for the upcoming legislative session. There's another area that the governor references, the Unified Economic Opportunity Commission, the UEOC, that which the commission also has a seat on to be able to help get that interconnectedness with housing. So the UEOC is looking at housing as well. There's another aspect that's taking place right now. Last year, an audit was conducted of the state regarding housing. And that audit was released in November of last year with an analysis of what was taking place in the state as well as recommendations to address. That audit and those recommendations have been assigned to a legislative committee, interim committee, the Political Subdivisions Committee. That legislative committee has been tasked with the responsibility of moving forward those recommendations from the housing audit. So there is a bill file that's opened by the Political Subdivisions Committee to address those recommendations in the housing audit, and that's moving forward. And then there's one other aspect that's happening in the state. Under the leadership of Governor Cox and also with Steve Waldrop, his senior advisor for housing that he referenced, there is work underway right now of creating a statewide housing plan. And they have pulled together many, in fact, many right here within the room and many others that are meeting on a weekly basis to be able to create a statewide housing plan that the state can look towards. And that's under development with, I think, the anticipated rollout of that and be able to share that plan with the state the first part of next year. So with all these different groups and these initiatives that are going on, the work is happening to make sure it's all collaboratively working and things aren't just happening in a complete silo, that there's a connection, that the right policies are connecting together so there's not duplication or there's not potential conflicts down as well. So that's kind of what's happening right now on the legislative front, and we'd be happy to answer any questions about any of those areas here in just a minute. As these conversations that are taking place right now, there's a couple of strategic questions that are being asked. And they're kind of simple questions, and the answers are a little simple and yet a little nuanced and complicated. The first question that's being asked is, what makes homes affordable? Just the simple question, what makes a home affordable? So that's one of the strategic questions that's being asked. And as it's getting whittled down, you're the experts in this particular area, and I am all ears to be able to hear from you. It's seeming to come down what makes homes affordable are primarily 2 areas: the size of the lot and the size of the home. I don't know if you might agree with that or not. There's many other things involved with that, but that's one of the questions. What makes a home affordable? So if we look at it from the size of the lot and the size of the home on that lot, the next question that's being asked amongst these groups and conversations is, how are lot sizes and sizes of homes determined? Kind of a simple question. How are lot sizes and size of homes determined? And as the conversations are happening, there's a lot of different answers and different aspects of it. It's seeming to coming down to zoning and land use. So you might agree with that, you might not. There's other aspects. And so if we go down that path of if zoning and land use determines the size of lots and size of homes that makes homes affordable, then what the third question is that's being asked is, what types of homes are needed to meet the market demand? And through data, the Kim C. Gardner, the data that's being compiled, also Envision Utah, many other organizations that are looking at this, the underlying aspect and the answer is homeowner occupied starter homes and those missing middle homes. So those are three questions that are being asked with potential answers to those. And if those are the right answers, then what would be the right policy recommendations? What would be the right solutions to move forward to be able to help housing be more affordable in the state of Utah? And as we are looking at this, there are so many cities that are doing great work throughout the state. There's home builders that are doing great work throughout the state as well. And it's wonderful to see organizations coming together and work together. If I can, just on a little side note, in some of these conversations, like with the Commission on Housing Affordability, it is wonderful to see everyone sitting around the table and having representation at the table and talking. And sometimes those conversations are presented with conflicting ideas. And sometimes it could be viewed as, this is complete contradictory of what my friend at the seat next to me just recommended. And yet everyone's at the table, it's civil, it's open, it's respectful, looking to try to understand each of those perspective from their own different shoes. And so I appreciate everybody's staying at the table through those conversations that are sometimes maybe a little challenging and maybe a little difficult, but it is happening, and that's another good piece of what is taking place. Let's see. The governor referenced that over the last couple of years, through the collaborative work of these organizations and Commission on Housing Affordability and cities and counties and the state, everyone working together, there's been a variety of different housing-related bills that have been moved forward. And those have been moved forward and have been also recognized across the country. Earlier this year, I attended a conference in Indianapolis. It's called the NCSL Conference. It's the National Conference on State Legislature. And this national organization right now, coincidentally, is also, the president is Utah Senator Wayne Harper. So it's wonderful to see Utah on the national stage with national leadership, with all the legislators across the country. Going into some of those housing conversations with representative senators throughout the entire state, throughout the nation, they were talking about the issues we're talking about as well. And so many of them were asking, how has Utah been able to pass these type of bills with these different types of tools that we're looking at in our state to replicate and model as well, looking at the way Utah has done this? And wonderful to be able to say it's through that collaborative effort. And so that's the hope, to be able to keep that going forward so we can find the very best solutions. Some have also described what's happened in the state the last couple of years from a policy bill perspective, is that some of the most comprehensive pieces of legislation, not only in the history of the state, but comprehensive-wide that other states are looking at. So it's just kudos to all of you. I appreciate your expertise and for your involvement in helping to create these bills. The land use bill, have anyone by chance read one of those full bills before? Could you raise your hand by chance? Thank you for your work and your involvement. You can see all of those lines, all of the code, all of those details. And I rely upon your expertise, and so thank you for your involvement of making those type of bills and policies possible. Well, that's just kind of a high-level view of what's taking place in the state right now, where things are at moving into the legislative session for January. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. Now, depending upon the questions, I might reach out to some of my good friends and colleagues here as lifelines to be able to help as well. And in addition to questions, please share with me what's on your mind. I've been taking notes this morning from the previous conversations, so I can take it back into these meetings and to be able to represent you and your opinions as well. So does anyone have a question?
So let's see what hands, maybe to get Representative White started. Can you give us an idea, Representative White, of some of the things that are being talked about that may be coming up in this upcoming legislative session?
Yeah.
And then if you all out there will raise your hands and we'll get your questions and comments as well.
You bet. Thank you. Here's a couple of the ideas that are being proposed, and the governor referenced a few of them as well. Maybe we'll start at that housing audit that was conducted last year and the audit recommendations. For each of those 7 recommendations that were contained in the audit, there are policy ideas that are being moved forward, that are being discussed right now. Here are some of those. Adding housing production and affordability as an express goal of LUDMA. It's not in that right now, but that would be one piece of it. Also is to have an independent appeal of land use decisions. So those are a couple of ideas with the audit recommendation number 1. Some other recommendations: allow some level of density in all residential zones, looking at what some recent legislation has happened in Montana and Arizona. Another policy idea that's being moved forward and being talked about is external accessory dwelling units statewide. Another is to have state allowance for upzoning residential areas. So another term for that is upzoning is maybe higher density in areas throughout the state. Some other recommendations, this is with the audit recommendations number 2.3, is to bypass the ombudsman for access to consequential damages. Another idea is to withhold B and C road funds. Another is to prioritize infrastructure grants and loans for compliance. And another is to revisit the moderate income housing plan to define data and tie to incentives. So these ideas are in the area that the audit recommended that to craft additional incentives and penalties associated with housing planning and targets to better ensure local government compliance. That was one of the audit recommendations. So these are some of the ideas moving forward that will both incentivize and penalize as well. So those are some of the ideas that are moving forward. And for your reference, all of that is publicly posted. This was shared in the Political Subdivisions Interim Committee last month. So it's all online. It's all out there for some different ideas that are being proposed. Now, you're going to see in some of those ideas, there are areas of consensus. Everyone's like, yes, this makes sense. There are other policy, those ideas that are moving forward that say, no way, this is just not going to work. And so there's not consensus on some of those, and those are where the more conversations are being looked at, seeing if we can get to consensus and seeing what can be done to make recommendations to the legislature in January.
Okay, maybe that raised some questions in your minds. Who's got some questions or a question that they would like to ask of Representative White? If you'd over here, Craig, we've got a hand over here.
I guess my curiosity was piqued when you talked about the upzoning and then also the B and C road issues there as far as funding. Can you expound on those and what type of momentum perhaps those have going through this legislative session coming up?
Oh, you go to the heart of those core issues right there. Those are very big ideas and they're consequential. Some are viewing those as those would be able to help move things forward, according to what the governor said. And there are those that are saying, no, that's not going to make a difference. So where it is right now, everyone's still talking and working through that to see if maybe there's, rather than those two, maybe is there another idea, another proposal that might be even better as well. So where it is right now as far as buy-in, there are some that are saying this is good and there's others saying this is bad, and those conversations are happening.
Other questions? Surely there must be some. Okay, right over here, Craig.
In your earlier statement about what drives the pricing of housing. It's either the size or the lot size. It's also really location of the lot. So what has the state done in looking at expanding the mass transit of, say, the Frontliner out to other areas to open up development where the land is less expensive, so that significantly would reduce the cost of new homes?
Oh, good question. And that's a great point, that the other determining factor is the location of those lots, where the land is and the houses are as well. In terms of the transportation piece of it, speaking with Utah County, how many by chance are here from Utah County? Several of you? There is the plan of extending Front Runner. The end of the line right now is in Provo. The plan is to extend that Front Runner down through Springville, Spanish Fork, ending at Payson. So there's environmental impact studies that are going on, and that's moving forward. That'll take several years to be able to do. In terms of other plans of expanding mass transit throughout the state, I would honestly probably need to talk with UDOT a little bit more about that, or maybe they could answer that a little bit better.
The problem I see with that plan is you're not opening it up to kind of greenfield development. If you pushed out towards Tooele or other locations like that, now you're creating cities which you can manage the whole density issue and less expensive lots.
Good point. Good point. Thank you. So those other questions? I'd love to hear your thoughts and input. We'll go to this question, also your thoughts and input on some of those ideas that are being discussed based upon those audit recommendations. What are your thoughts about some of those policy ideas?
Hi, thanks for coming. I think this is really helpful. I'm a citizen planner, so I have a couple of comments as well as questions for follow-up. When you talk about ADUs and you talk about modular homes, I think there needs to be work done, having owned one, on the insurance connection, as well as on conventional loans. So one of the things that we had to deal with was convincing banks or loan institutions that, and fortunately Zion Bank sort of got the deal, but that we weren't building mobile home, that we were, and being in Spanish Fork area, as you know, there's modular builders down there, and they're custom built homes, and they're building them now in ADUs, and I know up north they're allowing ADUs to go be dropped in people's yards as a secondary home. But there's still issues there related to insurance and conventional loans that somebody should be helping the consumer look at. My secondary question, which was really sort of more for the governor, but he rolled out yesterday his new healthcare model. And in the healthcare model, you have to deal with housing. And because people have healthcare issues when they don't have good housing. So one of the things I've heard a lot of talk about here is starter homes, but a lot of elderly people, the grandparents want to downsize. And a good way to get housing is to downsize those grandparents back into kind of a starter home. But their needs are different. So are you looking at the issues related to, them moving into a house? They don't want stairs. They might go into a multi-level condo, but what they really want is a small house with a small yard, single floor, which then you have the problem of how much land costs. So I kind of like to hear how is that being addressed? Because I think for most cities, and I'm in Mill Creek, so we are we're infilling. We don't have a bunch of land. How do you address those issues of really allowing your kids to upsize into a home in the mid-size because the grandparents downsize?
Thank you. Thank you for the input and the recommendations about insurance and also conventional loans. I'll share that with the teams as well. The type of option you just mentioned, I just visited one of those type of homes and communities just recently and saw that and heard the same thing from those, the elderly that were living there as well, and they were commenting about the exact same thing. We've talked a little bit about starter homes this morning here. There's a pent-up demand from the data from the Gardner Institute of about roughly 35,000 starter homes that are needed in the state within the next 5 years. There is also a pent-up demand statewide for someone that owns their first home and they may have outgrown it and it's small and they're ready to sell it and buy their second home to move into a little bit bigger. There is also a pent-up demand in that second home as well. So it's kind of through the entire housing funnel that there is need. I have not heard your great comments and suggestions about those type of homes without elderly of downsizing that could potentially free up other opportunities for the first-time home buyer too. So I'll talk about that and move that forward. So I appreciate that recommendation. And also what you recommend would be helpful to look at specifically with the issue.
There we go. Question back there, Craig.
Would you be able to explain the mixed neighborhood initiative that Montana is looking at? So it was one of the recommendations, and I didn't quite understand what you meant by that.
Yeah, the mixed neighborhood. I might, if I could ask for a lifeline here, maybe Cameron Dill, if he might be willing to talk about it now, or maybe in the panel when he's up here in just a minute as well, to be able to explain a little bit more of what that would look like and what Montana has done, or what it would kind of look like potentially be here within the state. If that's okay, I'll kind of punt to the specific details. Can you do it right now,
This is
Cameron?
like phone a friend? Is that what we're doing?
Yes, exactly. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Regis Philman.
Well, Representative White, I'm glad that it's phone a friend rather than phone an enemy or phone a frenemy. And I appreciate the collaborative approach that both you and Governor Cox have indicated here over the last hour or so. So Cameron Dill, the Director of the League of Cities and Towns, and I'll be on the stage in a little bit to respond more generally to what you've heard thus far. But just in respect to Montana, I'll do this quickly. I don't know where that question came from. Oh, hi over there. So I'll hit it quickly, and then I'm happy to chat afterward in more detail. What's interesting about how the state of Montana has approached housing policy with that, trying to find that balance of state control, local control, private sector, property owner, et cetera, is their initial foray actually is based off of what Utah has done with our moderate income housing plans. So Utah, and if Chris Gamboulis had the mic, he would tell you cities have been required to plan for moderate income housing plans since the late 90s, but we've really leaned into that in the last 7 years or so. Well, Montana didn't have any sort of moderate income housing plan framework, and in fact, in general, Montana didn't really have a Land Use Development and Management Act, period. So over the last few years, they've worked to create a Land Use Development and Management Act, which in Utah we really modernized ours starting in 2005, and we've made significant additions ever since. And they created a moderate income housing plan approach similar to what Utah did, where cities have a menu of items and they have to select certain numbers of those items. So Montana did that. And it only applies in Montana to cities above 7,000 in population. Our MIHP applies to cities above 5,000 in population. The legislature in Montana also went a little further than what has happened here with some state preemptions around ADUs and duplexes and other things that actually are in litigation right now because you've had cities sue the state of Montana over it. So when I talk to my counterpart in Montana as well as other places around the country, in many ways, they are looking at the collaborative nature of what we've done in Utah, and that's where it started. They went a little further, and it's now ended up in litigation, so the jury is still out. Interestingly, some of the big drivers for why that legislation occurred is because Montana has seen such a large influx of in-migration to the state. They've seen a large number of institutional investors and short-term rentals, that it's caused a huge tug of war in Montana. So again, I can talk in more detail about it, but it's an interesting case study compared to how we've approached things here. Does that help?
Thank you very much, Cameron. Thank you.
So just a quick update or a correction, Cameron. The Land Use Development and Management Act was originally adopted in about 1992 and then was substantially changed in 2005. As you well know, we talked a little bit about this yesterday with the nuclear option, but it raises the issue, and Cam mentioned what was happening in Montana, and you've mentioned Montana and Arizona, Representative, but in a number of other states where these kinds of actions have been moving forward from the state level down, they've encountered resistance at the local level. So the state adopts these policies and adopts these codes, and then there's resistance at the local level to the point of even a number of lawsuits. Cam mentioned the lawsuit that's taking place in Montana right now with regard to that. What do we do to try and avoid that?
Yeah, thank you. There are those that are feeling that zoning should be adjusted in the state. There's those that are moving forward some ideas of saying, you know what, zoning, the legislature should make some decisions regarding zoning that would impact all cities throughout the state. There are others that are saying, boy, that would not be beneficial and it would not get us to the final end decision that would really impact us as well. That conversation is taking place. There are some that are saying the situation is at a point in the state right now where we need to really be aggressive to be able to help housing with the things that the governor has just shared. And we're to a point where we really need to be able to increase what's being done to help solve the problem. But the question is being asked, will that really solve the problem? Sure, something could move forward and something could be mandated from the state that all cities would need to follow. But at the end of the day, a year, 2, 3 years down the road, would it really make a difference? And that's where the debate and the discussion is had, because there's definitely 2 points of view on it.
I'll hand over here. Okay, Craig, have we? Yeah, there we go. Here comes the mic. Or here comes Craig, or Craig the mic.
Okay, thank you. One thing that's been mentioned just a few seconds ago was the exemption from the moderate income housing plans for the smaller communities. But where the current 5,000 population cap falls means that a lot of rural counties, which are also the gateways to our mighty 5, really have no requirement for worker housing. And I'm wondering if the legislature might consider some reduced requirements, but applicability in the smaller communities.
You know, what you just described is that point that maybe one time a one-size solution, we've heard that phrase, one-size solution, doesn't help the entire state because of the different sizes and the different communities that are out there. Absolutely, I'd love to visit with you more. What would be your recommendation? Sorry, I just took the mic away from you. Here I am asking you a question. What would be your recommendation regarding maybe reducing some of those requirements?
It's pretty, you know, I've got some detailed ideas we could talk offline, but I think the fact that there's a blanket exemption right now means that it's easy to say, well, we're not required to address affordable housing at all. So I think but on the other hand, I would say, yeah, a community of 300, 500 people can't have a massive housing study that might be required for a large city.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Maybe one more right over here.
Back here.
Thank you.
From Ari. I thought, some of the things that Representative White, like the blanket up zoning of density, and some of the external ADUs might generate some more questions from you all. If you got the questions, ask them. That'd be interesting to find out. But Ari, go ahead.
I'm not going to ask about that. But, I'm going to ask, we do a lot of surveys at Envision Utah, and we just got one back where we asked a lot about people's understanding about housing. And pretty much everybody agrees there's a housing crisis, but at the most basic level, people don't understand the cause. People cite interest rates, they cite greedy developers, greedy landlords. Very few people cite a shortage of housing. And we've talked a lot about public pushback on a lot of the things that cities try or the state tries. And to me, that comes down to this lack of basic understanding. Is there something we can do to help people understand the basic cause of a shortage of housing?
Yeah. Ari, with your research and your surveys and the analysis, and Ari and the team Envision Utah has presented recommendations to the Commission on Housing Affordability and others. What would you recommend as far as educating the state with the data that you're seeing? What would be the most effective means to do that?
Well, I think there's already been some money allocated to an outreach campaign. I would love to see that continue and see the campaign focus on, what is the basic cause? Because I think once people understand that, a lot of these solutions just make so much more sense to them. Otherwise, it feels like people are pushing something on them that they don't want. But I think as much as you can allocate towards outreach campaigns, I think that would be great.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Speaking along that line, I had a chance to be a part of a panel of Utah women voters a couple of weeks ago. They asked the question, what is the cause? What's the real easy solution? And what's causing the situation in the state? All of the panelists went down the line. It was supply and demand. It was supply and demand. It was supply and demand. And those in the audience were like, oh, I could see that there was maybe not an understanding of one of those core issues, that so much of it comes down to supply and demand. So thanks for the recommendation about that campaign and trying to maybe get some money to help further that throughout the state.
So, Representative, just a nuance on something that Ari had talked about there. And Envision Utah did do a survey recently, probably within the last year or so, about people's attitudes towards housing and so on. And one of their responses that they got in general was that by and large people were willing to accept the idea of increasing density, getting more housing in communities. Those questions were asked on kind of like an overall basis for the state. The interesting thing, and there have been some national studies published on this, when you ask people at a general level, are you supportive of increasing density, increasing housing, they say yes. When you say, how about in your neighborhood? Well, not in my neighborhood, but everywhere else, yes. So that's the trick, how to overcome that part of it.
It is. I hear the same thing throughout the state. And then as the conversation continues, as we all talk about who would those people be, and those are our kids and our grandkids, and talking about it that way and then there's the agreement of, yes, we do need to have housing for our kids and grandkids, and it would be great if it was right here close by to us.
All right, we've got Mayor Silvestrini, and then following the mayor, we've got Tippy over here, and then I think we'll be out of time. So
Wolf, I'm rising in response to your challenge there a few minutes ago. One of the things that Representative White and the legislature and cities and towns have been having discussion about, and this is reflective of what passed in Montana and some other states around the union, to essentially allow zoning by right with respect to increasing density. And to some extent, that sounds like a great idea, especially where you put an ADU in the backyard of a 10,000 square foot lot. And the struggles that we have with that, on one hand, that's like a painless way to have density, to just double all the residential single family properties that we have. But there are consequences to that, and that's what local government has tried to point out. First of all, if we respect private property rights, a lot of us bought our properties with expectation that they would be single family, and then if they're going to make them all into effectively duplexes on those properties, there is an effect on that, and the public does rebel against that. The NIMBY thing is stronger there than anything else, especially if it creates burdens to the existing neighborhoods with respect to added on-street parking and things like that. The other thing that we have to balance as municipalities, it's our job, okay, to provide the infrastructure that makes all this work. None of you are going to like it if the capacity of your sewer line gets overloaded with a bunch of doubling up of single-family residential properties and you can't flush your toilet, okay? It's our job to make sure your sewers work, to make sure that you got adequate water pressure for fire flow and things like that. So those things need to be taken into account when we look at at concepts like by right zoning. And it's not to say that we can't look at some of these solutions, and not to say that the issue is the same in a greenfield development where you can plan for that stuff versus an infill situation where you're trying to add that additional capacity onto an existing system. But those are the kinds of debates we're having, and they're not easy answers. And I don't think that one size fits all in every community. The sewer size in my community are different in different neighborhoods, right? And we know those things. We have to plan for that in order to make this stuff work. So increasing density in those areas does make sense in some circumstances, but it needs to be done with planning and some care to that. It's not just all NIMBYism, it's also infrastructure.
Thank you, Mayor. Maybe, one last question.
Hi, I'm Tippy. I'm the current Utah chapter president for the American Planning Association. I have experience working in Eagle Mountain, Lehigh, and Saratoga Springs, so with high growth areas. And I have a similar comment about, we do have a housing shortage. We also kind of have a water shortage in these high growth areas. So regardless of density, the capacity, the build out of these cities that I've worked in is the same, right? So what is being done in terms of getting access to water? Because we can build density, but can we support it in terms of infrastructure and concurrency? I've had experience where we don't have, in Saratoga Springs, for example, we don't have sewer capacity, or we hadn't had it in certain areas, or we didn't have water capacity in certain areas. And regardless of what we approve and what we want to build, builders and the city, is just not possible until that infrastructure is built. So what is being considered in terms of water and utilities?
Oh, yes. Thanks for asking about that. Boy, you can see the interconnectedness we all know, you know more than I do too, on how interconnected this is. Housing, to the roads, to the sewer, to the water, to the electricity, how everything is just interconnected. And you can't just look at one solution for housing without seeing the impact and the ripple effects of everything else, and what the mayor just described as well. Infrastructure is a big aspect of it. We know that there's about, Cameron, about 190,000 entitled lots within the state right now. A lot of those are being stopped from moving forward because of infrastructure that's needed, and water is a big piece of that. The state has looked at, and the legislature's looked at, what could be done from an infrastructure standpoint to be able to help offset those costs for cities, the builders, and things that way. It's really coming down to dollars right now, and it's extremely, extremely expensive. So it's looking at, and it did this last legislative session, it didn't get into the bills to move forward because of the dollar figures that were attached that would be needed, but it's being looked at again right now for this upcoming legislative session of what could be done from an infrastructure to be able to help release those entitled lots that could move forward of building homes that would be in what we're talking about this morning. So I don't have a specific detail for you, but no, it absolutely is. The other piece of it is this Unified Economic Opportunity Commission, which that's a big name. Around that conversation and table, there's UDOT, there's water, there's education, there's healthcare, all these different aspects of it. So decisions aren't made just in silo without seeing the implications of everywhere else. So that's something that's I've appreciated, that it's looking at things holistically, including water and infrastructure. Yeah, thanks for asking. I'd love to visit with you more. Okay.
All right. We thank Representative White for his willingness to be here. Do you have anything you'd like to say in closing, Representative?
Well, just to tell you, thank you for your involvement. I'm looking forward to working with all of you and getting to know more of you as well. I really believe that we can help solve this problem within the state, and that we have the people and the expertise, the organizations involved in the state to be able to make this happen. So I am optimistic that we'll be able to do this. I also would suggest and recommend, if by chance you do not know your representative or your senator, please reach out to him or to her. Build that relationship and be able to have those communication lines so you can visit directly with your representative and senator. And I have learned that a person's voice, your voice, each one of us is can have a tremendous impact. So if you by chance don't know who represents you in the legislature, I'd invite you to get to know them well and work with them, and that will help as these different policy ideas and conversations move forward. They'll know what's on your mind and they'll be able to represent you well. So thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning.
We're going to be taking a break now until 10:30. I'd like to ask the panelists for the next session to come up about 5 minutes early so we can get organized and going here. And then Craig, instructions for our break?
You bet. Thanks again to this panel, the audience involvement, and just the high caliber discussion of issues. One of the, just editorially, one of the great advantages we have for having sat through this morning is even if we think we knew the answers before, we've heard new ways to explain them and to respond to people who don't understand. And I think all that's very positive as we try to build for the future. So thank you, everyone. Let me offer a special thanks to Doug Larson and Point Digital, who have been filming this for your future enjoyment. When you have an off minute and wanted to recall anything, the entire conference, each session will be available in the Utah Land Use Library at the utahlanduse.org website, as is past conferences. There's now 4 or 5 past conferences that are available for free streaming, for what that's worth. So be sure to sign up for continuing education credit. If you'd like it for today, sign up in the lobby. Realtors, you have to attend all 7 hours. It's a single course. Attorneys, you can report the number of hours you did attend. And planners are so much smarter than the rest of us. They just do this online. They don't even have to count to me for anything, which I like. One other request, in your packet is this page. If you have any feedback at all, any comments, please provide it. But what the question is on the page, what do we need to do in Utah to better provide training? With the resources of the Utah Land Use Institute and the Ombudsman's Office and others, we really can do quite a lot if we just knew specifically what you on the front lines would recommend that we do. Anyway, I'm through talking. Thanks a lot. Enjoy a bite, and we'll see you back at 10:30.